Here we go. All ones. Welcome to my node for all those in the know, chummer. In this Part 2 discussion of the Native American nations, we'll be discussing the Great Ghost Dance War and the Treaty of Denver. So make sure you're slotted in as we discuss the chip truth of these events. It was on December 24th, 2011 that everything changed. Magic had returned to the world. Most had no clue of the awakening until the Great Dragon Ryumu revealed themselves, but there were a few who knew of Magic's coming return. Among these who felt its return was Daniel Coleman, a 20-year-old Ute escapee from the Abilene Re-Education Center in Texas. After his escape, Daniel Coleman vanished from the public eye. It is now known that he and his followers spent the next few years organizing a resistance movement. While the powers of North America were denying Magic's return, Coleman was teaching the newly awakened how to weaponize it. Quickly, word of the shaman spread, fueling the fires of resistance as more natives escaped from the re-education camps. Daniel Coleman did not return to the public eye until 2014. Now calling himself Howling Coyote, he announced the formation of the Native American nations, a new coalition of native peoples. In this announcement, Coleman declared that the NAN laid claim to all of North America as theirs by right, and demanded the withdrawal of all peoples of European, Asian, and African descent from the continent, or they would be met with magical retribution. These demands were met with ridicule in the media by corporal propagandists, as the North American powers and the megacorps both looked at these threats as laughable, as at this time the powers that be were still busy trying to explain away the awakening with science. But they all stopped laughing when Redondo Peak erupted, burying the town of Los Alamos in a cloud of burning ash. Soon after the eruption, Howling Coyote appeared via vidcast from a nearby Zuni reservation. In this video, he took credit for the destruction of Los Alamos. Los Alamos was more than just a warning from the NAN, or a display of their military capabilities. It was a military target, home to the Los Alamos National Laboratory, whose main responsibility it was to ensure the security of the United States through nuclear deterrence. With the destruction of Los Alamos, the United States lost many of their leading minds in nuclear weapon development. Minds now needed as the US and Canada found themselves facing the weaponized magic of the NAN. In response, the United States dispatched the 6th Air Cavalry out of Fort Hood, Texas. They were tasked with bringing in the self-proclaimed shaman Howling Coyote so he could answer for the destruction of Los Alamos. However, on their way to the Zuni reservation, U.S. forces encountered out of nowhere a powerful storm, which caused multiple tornadoes that ripped their aircraft from the sky, preventing the 6th Cav from ever reaching the Zuni reservation. By the time a second force could be dispatched, Howling Coyote and his followers were long gone. Thus, the Great Ghost Dance War began, and no longer did anyone laugh at the threats of the NAN. Even as the megacorps joined US and Canadian forces in the war, there was little they could do to stop the NAN fighters, as they fought a guerrilla war through towns and countryside now depopulated by the first VITAS outbreak. It should be noted here the impact VITAS and the rise of the megacorps had on the war. While native populations were mostly spared from the VITAS outbreak as their captors isolated them in concentration camps, the North American powers were severely weakened. No longer were these nations the powerhouses of the 20th century, as the VITAS outbreak weakened their manpower, and the megacorporations greedily picked away at their economic and political influence for their own gain. As fighting broke out, Denver quickly became a major focal point of the war, as both sides saw the strategic value of the city, both as a transportation hub and for its military infrastructure. The city not only became a center for fighting, but also an ignored humanitarian crisis, as both sides cut Denver off from civilian supply lines. While combatants focused mainly on supplying their own forces, the people of Denver faced food shortages, riots, and a complete breakdown of medical care. In the last 9 days of the war, the shortages were at their worst, as nothing moved into the city, which caused many to do unspeakable acts to survive. As war spread all over the continent, the NAN found an unexpected ally in the nation of Mexico, who had just recently gone through their own cultural revolution against colonialism, even going as far as renaming their nation Aztlan as a means of embracing their indigenous identity. With claims of ideological similarities and the backing of Oro Corporation, Aztlan began supporting NAN forces in the name of anti-colonialism. Aztlan freely gave aid in the form of weapons, money, equipment, and safe haven from corporate and government forces, but fell short of any actual military action on their part. Many on both sides of the war have criticized the involvement of Aztlan, stating they were merely playing political games with a hungry eye on Texas, hoping to one day regain the former Mexican territory with the support of the NAN after the war, or failing that, move in with troops after the region had destabilized as he did in 2035. In this backdrop of total war, the newly elected president, William Springer, enacted Executive Order 321, which was ratified by Congress in the Resolution Act of 2016. This law was nothing more than a way of legalizing genocide, legislation that minced no words as it mandated the extermination of all Amerindians in North America. Though in Canada there was no corresponding law, they did however give the nod to the megacorps to deal with natives as they saw fit. The idea was that in the end they could claim no actual legislation of genocide on their part. By 2017, the joint North American and corporate forces had planned what is now known as a Genocide Campaign. As these powers gathered in preparation for the campaign, NAN forces were busy delaying and harrying their logistics with both mundane and magical means. These ambushes, storms, and uncanny events had hindered troop movements and supply lines throughout North America. During all this, the awakened men and women of the NAN, led by Howling Coyote himself, started a powerful ritual that he had taught them in his years while he spent in hiding, the Great Ghost Dance. All across the continent, they focused their newfound magic into one spell so powerful that many died from its casting. At 10:30 a.m. August 17, 2017, the Genocide Campaign began, and at 10:32 a.m. of the same day, Mount Hood, Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens, and Mount Adams all erupted with devastating fury. This caused the joint forces of the North American powers to a grinding halt as they realized Howling Coyote and the NAN had made good on their threats of magical reprisal with the equivalent of a magical nuclear bomb. As one reporter put it, Mother Earth let us know whose side they were on, and it wasn't ours. Due to the shocking defeat of the Genocide Campaign and fear of further magical reprisal, many took to the streets in protest of the war. In these protests, many of the now undermanned military installations were taken over by Amerindians and non-native sympathizers demanding a multinational peace conference be held. Due to military losses and the political pressure caused by public fear and protest, the North American governments and the megacorps had to admit defeat and grudgingly agreed to meet with the NAN in Denver for a peace conference. By November 2017, the US and Canada had started negotiations with a NAN leadership known as the Sovereign Tribal Council, led by Howling Coyote. Also in attendance was the nation of Aztlan, who had gained a seat on the Sovereign Tribal Council through their support of NAN forces during the war. After 3 long months of hard negotiation, all powers in attendance walked away with a treaty no one liked. In this treaty, the US and Canada recognized the sovereignty of the Native American nations and ceded the western half of North America, with the exception of most of California and a few extraterritorial enclaves like Seattle. They also agreed that there would be a 10-year population relocation plan where reservations would be put into place for non-native peoples and corporations wishing to remain in NAN territory. The city of Denver would be set aside as a neutral city governed by a council of 5 signatory nations with interests in the region. These nations were the United States, Aztlan, Ute, Sioux, and the Pueblo Council. Denver became a place where the treaty could be overseen on neutral ground by all the new and old powers of North America. Though no one was happy with the treaty, the conference still stands as one of the best examples in history for political compromise. I heard the words of the prophet around a fire 3 years ago. He was a strong man, powerful in body and spirit, and I was afraid of him. His words were strong too. He spoke of a new ghost dance, a great ghost dance. This time, he said, the magic would work. Unlike the ghost dance our ancestors performed, this one would shatter the yoke of our oppressors. He told us that the old prophets were right, though their vision had been clouded, and they had not seen the time for the dance. The world was not yet ready then, but now the time had come. His eyes were bright when he spoke these words, and I believed him. In the morning he was gone from our hidden camp, but he remained in our hearts.